from a mentor or a coach or an instructor before choosing the right canopy, rather than just making the decision for yourself, because you don't want to learn from the school of hard knocks. And I certainly did back in the day. I could start with a story. When I had about 300 jumps or so, I decided I was jumping a Sabre 150, and I was looking at getting a different canopy. And there was two options. There was a 135 for sale and a 120 for sale. And I decided to go for the cheaper option, the rig that was only $2,000 as opposed to the rig that was $3,500. So I chose the Stiletto 120, much to my Dezo's disappointment, and he actually recommended that I didn't get that canopy, but I ignored him. Within 50 jumps of jumping the Stiletto 120, I fractured my neck and I was out of action for 9 months. So I like to tell people that story. I mean, I went from a square Sabre 150 size. I jumped 2 sizes, and then I went to a different plan form, to an elliptical high performance wing. At the time, I'm talking like 24 years ago this happened. So yeah, learn from other people's mistakes. Don't make those mistakes yourself. I think there is better education out there, but there's still people who may not listen to their mentors or instructors or coaches, or continue to ask people until they get the answer that they want to hear. But it's really important to listen to your mentors, even though they might not hear the answer that you want to hear. It's because we care, and because we've maybe made those bad decisions ourselves, or seen other people make bad decisions. So there's 3 main things I want to cover today when it comes to choosing the canopy for you: goals, equipment, and skill. Now, before I get into those 3 topics, I just want to talk about the term downsizing. You probably noticed I haven't even brought that up yet. I prefer to say choosing the canopy for you as opposed to downsizing. The word downsizing seems to have a bit of a stigma to it, particularly for coaches and instructors. I know for myself, when someone comes up to me and asks if they want to downsize, alarm bells start to ring. And the first thing we need to ask that person is why. And a lot of answers we tend to get are, I've bought a new rig and the canopy I'm currently jumping doesn't fit it. I can't jump in strong winds. Quite often light jumpers, are limited to sort of, 15 knots and we're going backwards. But it's important to recognize that you need to have the skill before you can jump a smaller canopy or downsize. Other answers might be, I want a smaller container. I've heard my wing loading is too low. Now we'll talk about wing loading when we get into equipment, but that's a really hot topic as well. Or I'm underloading my parachute. Now I have heard this before, but there's really no such thing as underloading a parachute. I mean, we've got students who are jumping big canopies on really light wing loadings. So yeah, wing loading is a topic that we'll talk to in a moment. But underlying all these answers, it's probably poor education or even social stigma. People sort of want to look as cool as the fast parachutes and that are coming into land, the coaches or the more experienced people. But they need to realise that those people have spent a lot of time under each wing that they've jumped. So it's really important not to rush and jump a new canopy before you're ready. I was chatting with a friend the other night, and he's a young jumper who started jumping here less than 6 months ago. Obviously COVID has hit and hasn't jumped for a while. Anyway, he's probably got about 50 jumps, and he was on a canopy course recently before we went into lockdown. His background is in motorbike riding, and when he was a young kid, he used to ride motocross. And his dad had taken him to the competitions, and they'd meet some of the other dads and kids, and the dads with all their money and wanting their kids to ride really fast, and they buy their kid the hot rod, but the poor kid couldn't ride the bike. And Cabe's dad, he said to him, son, I want you to be able to ride the hell out of this bike before you get one of those hot rods, because I don't want you to injure yourself. And then when he was on my canopy course, I said a very similar thing. I said, you really need to be able to fly this wing as best as you can, be as confident under this wing before you change canopy or before you downsize. And so, that took him back to his motocross days, and he really related to that. So it's important that, you can really be as confident as you can under your wing before you change canopies. So let's talk first about goals. What are your goals? What do you want to be when you grow up? For some people it might be, I really want to be a tandem instructor. So if your goal is to be a tandem instructor, you probably want to stay on a big wing. The best tandem instructors I know who land consistently, and that's super important, because I did have some slides I was thinking about sharing with you, and it's the injury statistics in Australia over the last 10 years. And they seem to be quite similar. The most injuries we have in Australia are tandem landings, tandem passengers, and then students, and then probably tandem instructors, and then not so much with A, B or C license, or even D, but once we get to E, which I guess is your D, 500 jumps, we start to see a peak in injuries under canopy. So, as a tandem instructor, it's important, because you are in that area, the high risk area of having a landing injury, either yourself or your passenger. So important to have really good canopy skills, and to be able to fly a bigger wing is essential. So if that's your goal, then I'd recommend sticking to a large parachute and really understanding the flight characteristics and being able to fly consistently, to land consistently and be accurate. Now, if you want to be a competitive swooper, well, then that's a different story. Obviously you're going to want to downsize, but please don't be in a hurry. It's so important that you seek coaching, and that goes for any discipline that you want to pursue in skydiving, is seek coaching. But remember that every single skydive that you do involves flying a parachute. And what I've noticed in the 25 years that I've jumped is a lot of people spend time dirt diving their free fall, but not so much time dirt diving their canopy flight, unless of course they're on a canopy course. So really important that on every single jump that you, after you've focused on briefing your free fall, take some time to look out at the landing area, check the wind conditions, look at the loads who land before you, and so that you understand the conditions, whether they've changed, even the flight of other people's parachutes, how they land. You learn a lot just from watching. And then set up, have a plan for, your circuit direction, where you're going to be flying, even some in-air exercises that you want to practice if you're in the right, area to be able to do them. So definitely having a plan. Also having a plan, so like I said before, do I want to be a tandem instructor, or do I want to be a swooper? Do I want to be a free fall competitor? Once you've got this long-term goal, it might change. Your pathway might change based on people you meet or places you go. But really important to have a mentor to help you, on your pathway to achieve that goal. And if it is that you want to be, a swooper and a competitor, then, you've got to really set achievable and realistic goals, and don't skip any steps along the way. But really important to seek coaching, regardless of the discipline that you want to do. It's really important that you're not a passenger under the wing. And that's what I find when I run a lot of canopy courses. We call the first jump a bit of a coffee jump, where you just go up and fly the normal circuit that you do. And I see quite a lot of people just hanging in their harness. They might be the world's best belly flyer, but once they open up, they just become a rag doll. And it's really important, I call it active flying, to actively fly your parachute and be in control the entire time. You know, I hear of excuses of, oh, I got a side gust when I landed. But when in fact, you know, you are the pilot, you're in control, you need to control your parachute all the way until you've landed. And if you're not confident, please get on a canopy course. You've got some great canopy coaches over there in New Zealand, and, you know, just across the ditch here too. So once we can travel, yeah, please do yourself a favor and get on a course, because there's nothing like being able to watch your landing. You know, we've got videos of free fall. You know, most people have a GoPro on their head these days. So very important, you know, if you're having trouble with your landings, then ask someone to film your landing. And then, you know, because that video debrief, as we know, it works really well with free fall and increasing our skills there. So definitely, you know, it will help you with your landings. So next is equipment. What's the canopy that you're jumping right now? Is it in trim? Do we even know what that means? I've often been to drop zones and I'll watch people coming into land, and I'll watch the perfect flare, and the canopy and the wind conditions are absolutely fantastic, but the canopy just mushes in. So I'll ask that person, how many jumps is on that wing? I'll even, you know, walk up to them and you know, check the porosity of the fabric, and it's actually quite good. Then I have a look at the line set. Does anyone know roughly how many jumps before you need to change your line set?
500-ish.
Yep, 400-500 jumps. And these days, you know, the HMA lines, even the Vectran lines, they don't show a lot of wear. Whereas back in the day, you know, the Spectre lines, you know, got quite fuzzy. So it's really important to know how many jumps are on your line set. I've often heard of some people say they don't know, and I think it's really important. Or, you know, when I ask them, you know, they've just had that not so great landing and they say, oh, it's had about 500 jumps. Classic. That's the classic answer. It's time for a line set change. And quite often people don't even know that. So it's really important to know, you know, just like you change your oil and water in your car and get a tune up, getting a tune up on your canopy will make it fly much better. So it might be that, you know, you're thinking you're getting not so great landings. It could be your equipment and not yourself, not the skill. Condition of your brake lines, super important for safety as well. I've had friends who have actually, you know, done hook turns and went to flare and the brake line has snapped. You know, you've really got to, when you're packing your parachute, make sure that you're checking, you know, the integrity of your lines, particularly that lower brake line. As you're flying around, most of the time we do fly on toggles, and we're pulling the brake line through the guide ring on our riser, which is creating friction and heat, and that creates wear. And that's probably the most wear you'll get on your canopy over time is in your lower brake lines. So really important to be checking them when you're setting your brakes. And for those who aren't so experienced, if you're unsure, ask. You know, we teach that on the first jump course. There's no such thing as a stupid question in skydiving, particularly when it comes to equipment. What else? So what type of canopy are you jumping? Are you jumping a 7-cell? Now, you know, a 7-cell is a bit narrower, it's flatter, so it doesn't have as much glide as, say, a 9-cell. A lot of wingsuiters prefer using 7 cells because their opening characteristics, they're more susceptible to on-heading openings. So, you know, deciding on what canopy you want might be based on, you know, what discipline you're doing. Also, like camera flyers, you know, tend to prefer 7 cells for those consistent openings as well. square parachutes versus elliptical. We don't really have so many, completely square parachutes these days. They're more semi-elliptical or tapered, which gives you slightly more performance, particularly with harness control. Then you've got your more elliptical, which are more twitchy. And then you've got cross brace canopies. Now they're, much more, they're more high performance wings, but then they also make the wing more rigid, which is great for going fast and for competition swooping and that kind of thing. So really important that when you're deciding on what sort of wing you want, like I said before, if you're going to change a type of wing from, say, square to elliptical, you probably want to stick with just changing the type of canopy and not the size as well. Now, some people obviously can't afford that. That's another big thing that comes into play. Like I spoke to before about my story of choosing a canopy based on how much it cost. Not the right way to choose a canopy. But quite often, people say, look, I can't afford to buy the same size square, elliptical from the square that I currently have. Now, there's lots of manufacturers. You've got NZ Aerosports there. They have demo equipment. You could potentially hire that or even borrow it to try a different shape. Do a bunch of jumps on that and then change the size if and when you're ready. So let's talk a little bit about wing loading. I touched on it before. A lot of people put a lot of emphasis on the correct wing loading, or some manufacturers specify that an optimal wing loading for certain canopies. But it's important to know it's not just about wing loading. So if you take a small person who weighs 50 kilos, and I'm going to draw a picture. I don't have a whiteboard, unfortunately, but I did bring a pen and paper. So what I'm going to do is draw, can everyone see this? So we've got this 50 kilo person, and they're under a 120 with a wing loading of 1. Okay. Now we've got a 100 kilo person under a 190, and they've also got a wing loading of 1. That maths might not be quite right, but you get the drift. Okay. So you think about this. If we think about all the air molecules that are holding up these two canopies, which canopy has got more air molecules holding the wing up? Anyone?
190.
The 190, the bigger parachute. That's right. So if we think about a novice skydiver, someone who's 50 jumps, they probably should be on a wing loading of about 1. Do we want to be putting them on a canopy that's 120 square feet? No, I'm seeing lots of shaking heads. No, not ideal. Just because the wing loading, this number tells you it might be right. The fact is you have a lot less fabric above your head, which is, makes the canopy a lot more responsive and a lot less forgiving. I actually did a one-on-one canopy jump with a young girl. She had less than 30 skydives. Now, I was jumping a Sapphire 3 119, so a 120 essentially. I weigh about 65 kilos, so my wing loading was about 1.3. She weighed about 50 kilos. She was on a Sabre 2 120 with 30 jumps. Now, she'd been jumping this already for about 15 jumps and was very unconfident. Anyway, so I'm up there doing a one-on-one canopy jump where I have Bluetooth headset so we can communicate, and we basically, this sort of style of jump that I do is getting people familiar with their inputs so they can see what their inputs are doing in relation to another wing. So I get up there and I'm flying next to her, and I keep having to front riser to keep up with her. Now, remember, she's got a lighter wing loading than me, but it's not just wing loading, it's actually canopy type as well. Now, we were both on canopies that you think, oh, Sabre 2, Sapphire 3, pretty similar. A Sabre 2 has a much steeper descent rate than a Sapphire 3 or a Sapphire 2. And like I said, I had to front riser to keep up with her. When I landed, I said, look, I think you probably want to think about maybe upsizing. She thanked me. She was absolutely petrified of jumping that canopy, but her instructors had told her that this was the right canopy for her based on her wing loading. So really important that we don't just consider wing loading, but we think about the size of the wing. And sure, you know, it might mean that she can't jump in strong winds more than 15 knots for a long time, but you could either tell her to eat more McDonald's or, sorry, that's just going to be the way. You know, it is unfortunate. So yeah, that's my little story on wing loading. Really important to, it's, you know, it's sort of the last thing that we look at, or I actually don't even really look at wing loading when I'm thinking about changing canopies. What else? So when we're thinking about changing our canopy, we want to know, you know, what the difference will be. And like I talked about, you know, there's different shapes. There's also lots of different types of canopy. Like I just said, your Sabre versus your Sapphire, you know, different descent rates. They're shaped differently. The line trim's different. And the only, you know, the people who know this are the canopy coaches or maybe your instructors. So it's really important to ask for their advice before you choose the canopy for you. It shouldn't feel radical when you change canopy. If I remember going back to that story, going from the Sabre 2 150 or the Sabre 150 to the Stiletto 120, my Dezo had said, I don't think you should jump that. So obviously when I did my first jump on the Stiletto, I was shit scared. I was under that wing going, holy shit, what have I done? Because it was so twitchy. Anyway, by the time I got to the ground, I managed to land it safely for the first, you know, dozen or so times. But I had to put on a blank face and walk over and look confident, because I didn't want to show my mentor that I'd made a bad decision. And how silly is that? You know, in hindsight, what I should have done is land that very first time and go up to my mentor and say, you know what, you're right. I'm not ready for this. You know, and then 20 jumps later, I broke my neck, out of the game. I'm lucky to be alive. So again, yeah, be true to yourself. If you jump on a canopy that you don't feel is right for you, then, you know, listen to yourself and eat humble pie. And yeah, because it's not worth it. It's not worth your legs or your life. And remember your goals. You know, what are your goals? You know, your biggest goal should be survival and not being injured. And everything else is a bonus.
It's a common thing, Jules, you know, with new skydivers and the financial pressure with getting into the sport. And I think as experienced skydivers, we have a responsibility to hear these conversations that are happening at the drop zone when people are between a rock and a hard place because of finances, and really guide them to try and make the right decision. Because I have a very similar story to yours in jumping an absolute clapped out canopy for 200 jumps and spudding in so many times, and actually really losing confidence in my own canopy handling. But my canopy was just flareless. It was absolutely dead, you know, but of course I couldn't afford it, and it was the colors that I wanted. So yeah, it's a common thing.
It really is. And, you know, and we've got to help our friends out. You know, if you see someone, you know, who's constantly spudding in, you know, go up, but their flare technique is fine. You know, it's probably the equipment. A lot of people don't even register that or realize that. And that's going to give that person a lot of confidence, because it's not them. But B, you know, help them find another canopy. And sure, it could be that they're financially not well off, but, you know, there's payment plans, you know, there's ways around
borrow it. And yeah.
Yeah, beg, borrow, steal. Well,
Yeah, and help each other is the main thing, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, we're a smaller community for sure. Thanks, Sue. Now, the last topic is skill. So before we think about changing canopy, are you accurate? Are you consistently accurate? Can you land, within the certain area consistently every time, even in different wind conditions? So have you jumped in different seasons? Sure, you might be great in summer when there's nil wind, but what about in winter? When the winds pick up, it's turbulent. Are you still as confident? Can you land slightly downwind, or crosswind? Have you ever tried? Now, obviously, when you're trying, if you feel like you're getting really consistent landing into wind and you want to try landing crosswind or downwind, there's things to consider. Obviously, you're going to be getting in the way of other traffic. You're going to be going against the traffic. So you might want to think about opening higher or landing in a different landing location, at least telling the rest of the load what your plan is so that they know what to expect. Communication is so important. Is your flare consistent? That's super important. We need to be consistently flaring and, landing on our feet. Well, unless, of course, we're injured and you need to learn to slide your canopy and land, consistently, even if you don't want to stand up your landing. A landing that you walk away from is a good landing. Understanding the different inputs and effects and they have is super important. Here in Australia, our A license table is more about like circuits and landing and accuracy. And then for our B license, we've got lots of canopy drills that we do during our B-rail training jumps to get people to understand the wing, the different inputs that they have and how they affect the performance of their wing. Like I said before, I like to go around in my canopy courses and offer one-on-one canopy jumps, because quite often, you try your front riser, you try your rear riser, you can feel the difference, but it's really nice to be able to see the difference relative to another parachute, and that gives you a lot of confidence in actually understanding how your wing flies and the effects that different inputs have. So I highly recommend, if there's any coaches out there who aren't currently doing one-on-one canopy jumps, feel free to hit me up. I'd love to run you through it. I have run train the trainer courses around the country, actually teaching coaches and instructors how to do these jumps safely. And there are now lots of instructors and drop zones, including one-on-one canopy jumps as part of their B license training, which is really great.
That's awesome. I'll be hitting you up on that, Jules.
Yeah, cool. I know I've jumped with you already. So yeah, now that you've done it a bunch of times with me, use it now as a coach.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. And I can't recommend the Bluetooth headsets enough. And you can find cheap stuff online to set up so that you can easily communicate with the person. And yeah, it's a really fun jump. I've done these one-on-one jumps with people with thousands of jumps for the first time, and it blows their mind.
It blew my mind doing it with you a couple of years ago. It was, I learned so much. I'd highly recommend it. And we either need to get you over here to do your Pull Your Strings program again, or indeed a Train the Trainer initiative. Yeah.
I think this is the first year in probably 5 or 6 years that I haven't come over to New Zealand, which is really sad. I love coming over there. So once we get out of lockdown, for sure, love to come over. So we talked about jumping, in different weather conditions, hot versus cold, air density changes, how the canopy flies, nil wind versus strong wind. I often coach a lot of people who consistently land in strong winds. Maybe they jump on the coast or on just at a windy drop zone, and they're just not used to finishing off their flare because they don't have to. But then when they go to jump in nil winds, because they've got this muscle memory of not finishing their flare, they're not getting the most out of their flare. So just understanding, how you are flying. We talked about different seasons. What about other drop zones? Have you traveled to other drop zones? Air density, density altitude, should I say? So drop zones at a higher altitude. have thinner air, and it actually feels like a faster landing, and that can affect how you fly your wing. And we talked about landing downwind versus crosswind, landing off the drop zone. Have you ever landed off the drop zone? Are you confident to land off the drop zone under the wing that you're currently flying? Could you land your parachute in your backyard? Well, depending on the size of your backyard. I live on an airport, so yes, I can. But I could also land just, within a 10 square meter square if I had to. And that's something really important to consider, that if you never have landed off, it's a good idea to always have that in the back of your mind. Like I explained before, there's some really great videos out there online. Access Flight School have some great training videos, not only on inputs and their effects, but also on accuracy tricks and landing off. So if you Google Access Flight School, or maybe I could share that with you, Sue, a great resource for coaching, or also, just for people who are wanting something to do while they're in lockdown and learning. But there's nothing beats getting coaching, for sure. Don't think that you're going to be the world's best parachutist just from reading a book or from watching a video. Really important to get the guidance and coaching. Do you have your own downsizing criteria? We've got one, sort of an APF standard that we have, and basically it's again, I was going to share my screen with this. Changing one size at a time, like I talked about before. So from square to elliptical, or elliptical to cross braced, and or sticking to the same size and same type and changing one size at a time. There's in-air exercises in our A and B license training table. And now that's not to say that you only have to do that to get your A or B license. On every single wing, you should practice those same exercises and understand how this new canopy flies. Where's the stall point? Where's the flare point? How does the harness input feel? How do my front risers? Are they heavier? What are my rear risers? How are they affect? Where's my maximum glide? Coming back from a long spot. These are all things that we need to practice on every single wing. And different landing approaches, half braked approach, full glide approach. We talked about landing slightly crosswind or downwind, landing on a slope, particularly if we had to land off. Consistent accuracy in different wind conditions, having a plan. Now that's probably the most important, and obviously having the guidance or the approval from either your mentor or your chief instructor or an instructor. I often come to drop zones and run canopy courses, and I'll have someone on my course, and I might have seen them land once or twice that day, and they'll ask me, am I ready to downsize? And I say, I don't know. Are you? I've only seen you land twice. You might have a really good attitude, and you might be landing very well, because today's conditions are perfect. But I actually need to go and ask their coach or their instructor or their CI and find out, is this person consistent? I can't actually give them advice. Just because I'm a good canopy coach doesn't mean I know you very well and I have seen you jump regularly on a consistent basis. So it's really important that you seek guidance from people who know you and who know your skill set and who have seen you jump consistently. So that's mainly what I wanted to cover is, really thinking about setting good goals and knowing your equipment and knowing the skills that you have. And that's going to help you decide choosing the right canopy for you. So I guess I'd like to open it up to any questions that people have or comments, anything you think I missed.
I just brought a Sapphire 3119.
Yeah, great.
And I had previously had a Crossfire 2119. And so I didn't downsize, I just changed my canopy exactly how you suggested. And I'm not the most confident canopy pilot, I've never been. And it's changed so much for me, having a canopy that I'm confident in, and that it's slowed down certain aspects of my canopy ride, which is allowing me to think a lot better. So, you know, just testament to what you said, you don't always have to downsize. In coming back from an injury, I've upsized, not this time, but, you know, 10 years ago or whatever. And that gave me a lot of confidence. I think I was on a 135 something or other. And then I did my knee in, and after a year rehab, came back and upsized to a 150. And that felt so comfortable. So it's not always about downsizing, it's about choosing the right canopy.
Absolutely. And I'm finding exactly that, Sue. You know, people coming back from injury, what I've seen is they might have put on some weight, and they go back and they've had a year off, and then they go back and jump the same wing that they used to, and their very first jump back, they go and re-injure themselves. You've really, and you know, these are people with thousands of jumps. You've really got to, you know your limit, and know, you know, don't be ashamed to upsize. There's nothing wrong with it. I actually have a handful of canopies. I think the smallest canopy I've jumped is a 69 layer, but I tend to jump either my Sapphire 119, the Sapphire 3. I love it. And it's so versatile for jumping with one-on-ones. Or my Crossfire 389. Now, there's quite a bit of a difference. I do have 11,000 jumps, and I would say more than half of them are hop and pops, either crew or canopy. So either one-on-ones or competition. So, you know, and I'm confident, but I'll tend to, you know, after this big break, you know, I'll probably just jump my Sapphire 119, because that's the one that I jump the most. And then after a couple of jumps, I'll go and chuck on the Crossy 389. And then I might go to my layer. You know, I'll take my time, because, you know, it's not worth it. And yeah, and you're right, people, as you get older, I know a lot of friends who are upsizing, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's about longevity in the sport. Anyone else have any stories or comments or questions? Don't be shy.
And
got a quiet bunch out here.
Yeah, totally.
Has no one had enough coffee yet?
I was just going to say, we need to inject some coffee into the screen. Caffeinated much? While people are having a think, I just also want to make people aware that we've got a pretty cool presentation on our website, just a bunch of slides that was put together last year by Henry Morgan primarily, and it's talking about a lot of the same stuff that we've been talking about today. The decisions, if you're wanting to decide, am I ready for a new canopy, whether that's downsizing or just a new canopy, all of the things that you should be trying and knowing if you can do. And the overall push, of course, is to get a coach involved. You know, no presentations or slides or books are going to take the place of the coach. But there is a really good presentation that runs through a lot of what Jules have been talking about today, and it's on our website in the resources section. So the Nzpf is a new website, in case anybody isn't aware, nzpf.org, and there's a resources page, and in there is a guide to essential canopy skills and downsizing. So I would encourage all skydivers to go and have a flick through that. And we'd also, you know, really invite any coaches around the country. We don't actually have a canopy coach rating in New Zealand, but as many of you have gained your skills abroad and have brought them back. So if you guys want to take that presentation and do a presentation for the lesser experienced skydivers at your drop zone, that's what it's there for. It's there as a resource for you to use.
Yeah, great. Yeah, look, we only recently introduced a canopy coach rating in Australia, and it really has made a difference. The main reason we did it was to see some consistency in canopy training. And it's definitely improved the statistics of landing injuries over the years. And that was the main goal, you know, it was to reduce canopy related incidents. and also increase the level of education, and like I said, make it more consistent around the country. You know, the other goal is, you know, I went around the country running a train the trainer course, hoping to encourage more people to get a canopy coach rating. And what I found was a lot of AF instructors would be coming on my course only to upskill their knowledge in what to teach their students, and not to necessarily run a canopy course. And that's exactly why I ran those courses. You know, you don't need to necessarily get a canopy coach rating to run a canopy course, but just to you can jump on one of these canopy courses to better your knowledge, but then to also, so that you can also pass that on, you know, to your students, to your novices, to people who are lesser experienced than you. Yeah, because I think it's something that is still not done as well as it could be in the initial instructor rating. The focus on canopy education, it's more focused on the free fall education, and that's something that you know, we'll continue to work on, is increasing the level of education for our coaches and instructors, to include that canopy component.
Yeah, it's so important. We don't have any coach ratings in New Zealand so far, but I think you'll probably be aware from our communications that this season we're just looking at bringing in a free fly coach appointment just on a trial basis, and I'd love to talk to you further about a canopy coach one, because I think, you know, maybe next season it's something that we could look at getting in because it's just so important.
Yeah, great, awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Love to chat about that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, skydivers, any more questions for Jules? Or shall we let her go about her day? Thank you so much, Jules. Oh, yeah, go.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, Jules. So what is your opinion on using older model canopies? So, for example, the canopy, I have a Sabre 1150, which has barely ever been used. It's like crisp new, but yeah, but
yeah, and yeah, good question. Look, you know, it is older technology. I did jump a Sabre 150 when I first started, you know, 25 years ago. One of my first, my first own canopy. I know the biggest thing with the Sabre 1 version is, you know, the harder opening. So if you can pack it well to avoid those hard openings, and, you know, particularly for longevity in the sport, you know, your neck and your back are so important. As far as flight characteristics, you know, it's not as advanced as the canopies that we have today, but if it's, you know, if it's almost crispy new, it's still a good parachute in my mind. You know, if it flares well, then, you know, in my mind, there's nothing wrong with jumping old technology, as long as you realise that, you know, there are better canopies out there, but as long as you're landing it safely and it flies okay, and like we talked about before, understanding, you know, when it gets out of trim, how many jumps it has on it, you know, checking your brake lines on a regular basis. Yeah, nothing wrong with jumping an old canopy, you know, because when I say old, yeah, old technology, but compared to a clapped out, you know, if it was a Sabre 2 but completely clapped out, I'd be choosing the Sabre 1 that's brand new. Yeah, so yeah, good question.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, because I've used it for a while and I was considering like changing, but yeah, like the financial struggle is real. So, and it's still like in very, very good condition. So that was why I was asking.
Sure,
thank you very much.
No worries.
Presentation. It was really good.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and just keep a check on, you know, a tally on how many jumps that line set has. Know that when it gets to 400 or 500 and it's starting to change, you know, the flight characteristics, then it's time. Yeah, time to get a new line set.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jules, hi, Neil. Yeah.
Hi, Neil.
Hi. Can you please explain the big differences in the Sapphire 3 and the Sabre 3?
Ooh, well, That's a really good question. I know a lot about the Sapphire 3 because, you know, I am sponsored by NZ Aerosports, and they've been kind enough to give me a Sapphire 3 to do one-on-one canopy jumps with people, and I've flown it a lot. However, I haven't flown the Sabre 3, and I've only seen a couple at our drop zone recently. From my understanding, the Sabre 3 is similar, like what I talked about earlier with the Sabre 2 versus the Sapphire 3 is the steeper descent rate. From my understanding, the Sabre 3 still has that steeper descent rate than say a Sapphire 3. So you know, when it really is a personal preference whether you prefer a slower flight or a faster flight. I'm not really sure, I must say, on, you know, any of the other flight characteristics, just because I haven't flown a Sabre 3 myself or had much feedback from other people flying a Sabre 3. But the biggest thing I would say is just that descent rate.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Well, maybe we'll let everyone have a bit of a break, because there was a break between me and Tom. Tom went overtime and I've gone under time.
That's all good.
I'm right on time.
You know, you're perfectly on time. Thank you so much for being with us, Jules. Thanks for being with us today. And thank you always for supporting New Zealand skydiving. You and I both know that I'm in your ear all the time asking for advice about various things that we're doing here in New Zealand. So thank you for always taking the time to work with me and to guide us here. We really appreciate it.
Oh, pleasure. Yeah, the pleasure's all mine, Sue. And like I said, once the borders open, I can't wait to come back over and share some more knowledge and jump with you all and enjoy the beautiful country that you have.
Yay. Thank you, Jill. See you soon.
See ya. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thanks for joining.
See you, everybody else, in the next presentation. Jill Grantham at 11.